history is important. History is important because we can't really understand what's happening right now in our world through our own experience and seeing the news and even talking to old people because they're still alive. They haven't lived through all of what we get to see in the context of history. We get to see these patterns, and we really get to start to understand where it is that we sit now. And it allows us to, if we look at it with wisdom, to not repeat the same mistakes and start to find a way and a path forward. And I have been obsessed with this Moravian Methodist movement that happened in the 1700s because it did things like got the British West Indies slave trade abolished. It did things like started a 100-year prayer movement where somebody was praying every hour of every day for over 100 years. It started as what we know as the modern missions movement of people going all across the world, living places, sharing the gospel. The Methodist movement changed society. It flipped what was happening, this tension that was building in Great Britain at the time. It took that and flipped it on its head. And it's important for our context right now because it seems like things are so bad and it seems like the tension is building and the tension is rising. So what I wanted to understand was how in the past has the church actually made an impact and changed society. And in the research for this book, this paper that my friend Adam Munchall and I have written, we called it Boxed Wine and Bad Ideas. In the research, we found a couple of statistics that were pretty shocking. Like one is with the millennial and Gen Z generation, you have less than 27% are actually showing up to church in the U.S. right now on a regular basis. It was a Barna study. You have another study that was done in 1999. They took the average of dollars spent, and they did it in India at the time, per baptism. And it was something like $9,000 they spent per baptism. They did that same research in the U.S., and it was $1.5 million per baptism. It's insane. Now, that's not coming against the way that we do church. What it's coming against is we get trapped in this one way of doing things and this one way of doing church. And if the goal of what it is that we are doing is to reach the lost, is to save the lost, it's to seep into the cracks and crevices of society, as Alan Hirsch would say, if that is our actual goal, to bring fidelity and freedom to people, to the lost, to the people that don't know Jesus, if that is our goal, then we're not doing a great job by focused on one way of doing things. But the problem historically is that we get into this argument. Is it big church? Is it small church? Which one? So the big church people say that, well, you don't have vision and you don't have resources, things like that, inside of just the small house church movement, which is fair. The house church movement says, well, you lack intimacy and organic growth and depth, and there's weight to that argument. But the problem is, Jesus said, people will know that you're my disciples by the way that you love one another. And we're fighting over methodology. We're sitting here fighting over my way's best or my way's best. And we create these processes and we have to stick to that and try to teach the world our process. But Eugene Peterson called the pastorate the most contextualized vocation on the planet. And it is. But it's not just for pastors. It's for Christians in general. It needs to be contextualized. We get so rigid in our prognosis of what's happening, like the sickness that's going on. It's like, this is the only way to do it. But that's prideful, and it's silly, and it's stupid. And history shows us that it's a dumb way to go about it. So what we don't need is one specific way to do it. But what is the heartbeat of when movements actually changed culture and changed people's lives for the better and had the efficacy of life change, of healing that Jesus told us that we would see as followers of him? So in the research for this book, one of the scriptures, obviously we called it Boxed Wine and Bad Ideas, so one of the scriptures that stuck out the most was when Jesus was questioned about fasting. And his response was this. He said, "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth onto an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. It's Matthew 9:16 through 17. We quote this often because we know what it means. Like, we all have a general sense of what this means. It's that Jesus is coming with the new covenant, the new kingdom. Like, we get the symbolism, we get the idea of it. Everybody likes the old wine better, so we want to stick to how things were. But if we take new wine, put it into an old wineskin, the wine expands, the wineskin bursts. We know all these things. But why did Jesus teach it in the context of fasting? What did it have to do with fasting? Now, in order to answer that question, we have to go back and understand why it is we fast in the first place. What is the purpose of fasting in the first place? Why would Jesus answer this weird little parable with their question on fasting? And this is what I want to read. So this is in Isaiah. It's Isaiah 58. I'm going to read a bit of scripture. So just, you can read it with me. Follow along. It's 58:4. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast that I've chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, or for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and to not turn away from your own flesh and blood. Listen to this. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Last part, this is the point. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here I am. The reason we fast is for justice and for his presence. Jesus was bringing justice on the earth. He had been healing the sick. He was healing. He was saving. He was doing the work of justice, and his presence was right before them, yet they didn't recognize him. They got so trapped in their way of doing things, in their ritual of fasting, that they forgot the point of why they were fasting in the first place. He said, you are fasting for my justice and my presence. Yet you've completely missed the fact that I'm here giving justice and I'm standing right before you. So now we completely missed the presence. All these people that were waiting for the Messiah now completely missed his presence when he was right there. Remember, history is important. So why would we assume that we don't do the same thing today? That we don't get trapped in our own process and our own methodology and our own way of doing things and completely miss what it is he's doing, the new thing he's doing. It's the same old gospel, but it's the new ways to reach people. Because if we are not reaching the people and people are not coming to Christ, if we're not reaching the masses, then we're doing something wrong. And it's not just that big church is the problem or small church is the problem or everything in the middle. I mean, we know people that they're traveling around the country in an RV park. My friend Shane Boyd's traveling across the country in an RV park, preaching the gospel and starting churches in RV parks. I have a friend, Josh Brown, who has a pressure washing company. They call it the pressure washing pastor. They bring pastors in and teach them how to run a pressure washing business, give them all the tools they need and send them back so they can be ministers in the marketplace. We have friends doing church on beaches and in bars and in coffee shops and jiu-jitsu gyms. They're calling them grapple chapels. Like all these different ways to reach people that we're not reaching with our specific way of what we say is just church right now. So here's my point. There was this crazy movement that happened throughout the 1700s that bled into the 1800s and beyond that completely changed the world as we know it. But one of the brilliant things that they did inside of this movement, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking through the practices and some of the things that they did, but the practices were not the point. If we get trapped in the practice but miss the heartbeat, behind why they did this in the first place and why we are doing what we are doing in the first place, then we're going to miss it. We miss the ability to bring people to him. There's this scripture in Luke. I read it the other day. I wasn't going to say this in the video, but it just came to mind and I want to read it. Listen to this. Here's what Jesus says. It's like the whole woe to you area in Luke 11. He says, "Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering." God forbid that's what we do. We're not entering into his presence. We're not entering into the fast that he's called us into. So not only do we not experience it, but we hinder others from doing it as well. Okay, I'm going to end it now. Bye. See you next week.